At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome in, everybody, to your weekly edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast, your weekly look at news from around the nation in conservation and sporting news. This is the week of February 24th, 2025. This week, we're bringing you our lead story. CSC members drop bill to stop foreign evasion of conservation funding. Chris Horton joins us here momentarily. The fur ban narrowly passes committee in Washington. We have a bill in Minnesota that looks to satisfy both parties as it relates to our concerns, our CSF concerns of free and discounted hunting fishing licenses. CSF priority hunting access bill clears the first legislative hurdle in South Carolina. And finally, baiting for fur bearers under the gun in Vermont. All that and more. Let us now welcome in our longtime guest, Chris Horton, Director of Fisheries here at CSF, to cover the latest and greatest. This is actually a really great article. And, Chris, as we welcome you in here, I'll let the audience know, as part of our changing of the guard coverage from a week or so ago, we did have Congressman Panetta teed up to talk about this very thing. Unfortunately, our schedules just couldn't line up with all the other stuff, budget reconciliation items going on down there on the Hill. But we have you here to talk about this. It was just dropped, this new bill that covers, what titled here, evasion of conservation funding. It sounds ominous. It is, in a sense. You're going to explain all that, but talk about Congressman Panetta's and Rep. Moore and Congressman Moore's bill here and what this actually means and what's been going on for a number of years here as it concerns online marketplaces.
Yeah, Fred, thanks for having me back on. I think this is the first time I've been on since the beginning of the new year in 2025. So it's
I can't believe it.
Good to be back. This is a very important bill that we began working on last year with the American Sport Fishing Association and the Archery Trade Association, because discovered that the proliferation of online marketplaces is creating this little loophole for paying the conservation sales tax. And for folks that don't know what that is, we never waste an opportunity to talk about it. But the Federal Aid and Wildlife Restoration Act, also known as the Pittman-Robertson Act, passed in 1937, which diverted an 11% excise tax on firearms and ammunition into a separate account that the Fish and Wildlife Service basically sends back to the states for wildlife conservation. Well, that was so successful that the fishing industry said, hey, tax us. And so the Federal Aid and Sportfish Restoration was passed in 1950. It's also known as the Dingell-Johnson Act, which put a 10% excise tax on fishing tackle, rods, reels, hooks, bobbers, as well as electric trolling motors. And then that was further amended by the Wallet-Rowe Act in 1984. It included a motorboat fuel tax and small engines fuel tax. But anyway, all this money it forms the cornerstone, really, or one of the cornerstones of the American system of conservation funding. And it's the most successful model in the world. So it's a user pays public benefits model because all these funds come back to the states for fish and wildlife management and to improve habitats and enhance the fish and wildlife populations out there we all enjoy. So, but over time, the facilitation, again, of these online marketplaces where now you can buy a reel direct from China that's shipped directly to your door, they're not paying the tax. So the tax is paid at the first point of sale. So when the manufacturers sell to wholesalers or sell direct to consumers, they're paying the tax, except for the ones from overseas are not paying that tax. And technically, according to a GAO report, Government Accountability Office report that came out last year, technically the American consumer is the first point of sale. So you and I, if we're ordering from a manufacturer that's not part of this system, we're the ones responsible for the tax. Well, the IRS actually can't even they can't even administer that, or it'd be very suit. Yeah, yeah. Right, right. So the GAO basically made a recommendation that Congress needs to fix this, and they need to fix this by making the marketplace facilitator, the Amazons, and the other companies out there, they need to be considered that first point of sale, and they need to be the ones collecting and paying the tax. So um, the extent is right now a very conservative estimate is around 19 to 20 million dollars that we're losing for this fund each year. That's only expected to go up. And again, that's a very conservative estimate. It's likely higher than that. But anyway, Congressman Panetta and Congressman Moore both said, "Hey, yeah, we want to address this. This is important. It's important to our conservation funding model. We don't want to see it eroded, and it certainly could if we allow this to continue to happen." So they introduced a bill that will basically fix this. It will require the marketplace facilitators to uh, be that first point of sale basically and being able to collect that tax. And it's not just fishing equipment. This also applies to archery equipment as well, because archery also has a 10% tax on that. And in talking with the Archery Trade Association folks, there's only one arrow company in the U.S. that's manufactured in the U.S. Most of the arrows that are sold are coming from overseas, and are not likely paying the tax. So we just want to address this. We want to continue to make sure that this highly successful model remains highly successful, and that American manufacturers and American importers that are part of this system are not at a competitive disadvantage.
And I think it's worth note too here, like this isn't greedy Americans, trying to, dig deep into foreign pockets here. And that same study you cited also acknowledged that these people likely don't even know that they're missing this and, the marketplaces are missing it. Our own community, hardly knows about Pittman Robinson too. It's that's saying something. So if we internally as a community have a hard time perpetuating the story as much as we talk about it, but in totality, it's hard to expect that some foreign manufacturer is gonna account for this if they didn't even know about it. So I just want to put that out there as a disclaimer. Like, there's no shenanigans that we're aware of that's going on, or there's no greed involved here. It's just, like you said, fixing that unintended loophole that digital market space has created, and ensuring that we're appreciating the potential from that buying power, which is, again, going back to what you said, almost 100 years ago, our entire community of all stakeholders coming together saying, "Hey, we need to make sure we got to fix."
Yeah, absolutely. And this just happens to be the 75th anniversary of the Federal Aid and Sportfish Restoration Act, and so we've had a very successful program for 75 years, and the Sport Fishing Boating Partnership Council, which I'm a member of, we're looking and exploring, the solvency of this program down the line as things change. Fuel tax may fluctuate if more EVs, electric vehicles, come on the market, and there's some pilot programs in some states looking at miles driven for tax purposes. So there's some things that could impact the fund. So just looking ahead at how do we make sure that we continue to have the most successful conservation funding model in the world. And this is just one little problem that we see right now that we can easily fix.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. So we anticipate this probably clearing in a bipartisan manner. Do we, kind of rolling the old 8 ball here? Do we think we're going to get a good thumbs up all the way through and look forward to seeing this get signed, or are the waters just a little too tumultuous right now with efficiencies and people figuring out where they lie right now?
I think from Congress's perspective, this is something that will, knock on wood, you never know what's going to happen with Congress, but I'm optimistic this one's going to pass pretty quickly and in a pretty bipartisan. I mean, it's solidly bipartisan, and we've met with dozens and dozens of offices talking about this issue and haven't had a single office question or pushback. It's like, yeah, this is something we need to fix. So it's being
And again, I kinda tongue in cheek joke about what's happening now. We have this big culture shock down on the Hill. elections have consequences, all the bumper stickers you want to throw at it, right? But you would think and look at it from the new administration's point of view, I would think that seeing what the conservation community has done for almost 100 years, that's wildly efficient. We're not asking anything else from, people being coerced or forced into paying this. It's a whole community that came together and agreed this is the right thing to do. Um, and it's self-feeding, which is great. So you gotta think people are gonna get right behind that and push that right on through and say, "Hey, let's get
Oh
this."
yeah, yeah, definitely confident that that'll be the case because again, this is we're the users. Even though the manufacturer's paying the tax, obviously that tax gets passed on to the consumer in the price of the product. But hey, we've been supportive of this for 75 years on the fishing side, and much longer than that on the hunting side. And it's something that the industry, those of us that participate in hunting and fishing, we see the value in it. We see what it does for our state fish and wildlife agencies, and it's something it's uh it's nonpartisan in every way. Essentially, fin, fur, and feathers transcend party lines, or should in most cases, and this is one that definitely does.
Perfect. Well put. We'll leave it there, Chris. Thanks as always for your contributions and spending some time with us. And we'll look forward to follow up reporting on this, and hopefully we do see that fast track right through both chambers and get on to the president's desk. Thanks again, Chris.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to Chris one more time for his moments there shared here on the program. Let us continue on with the rest of the news. This from Marie Newmiller. Heading out to Washington, House Bill 1775 claims to be fur farming reform. However, it would have impacts on trapping, fly fishing, and other outdoor activity products. The bill narrowly passed out of the Washington House Ag and Natural Resources Committee and will likely head to the House floor for further consideration. CSF will continue to work with the Washington Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus members and partners to emphasize the value of regulated trapping and the practical use of furs from the outdoor recreation. So this happened the end of last month. That same House Bill 1775, the title prohibiting activities related to the production and manufacturing of fur products. That we've seen stuff like this similar. I think we covered in the last session. Rhode Island comes to mind. It was introduced, as we said, and the bill claims that its goal is to curtail the fur farming and creates an account to help fur farmers transition to another industry. However, the bill's broad language raises questions about the potential impact on legal regulated trapping and the availability of fur based products, including those used by fly tying for fly fishing, a critical component of Washington's recreational angling community. During a hearing on February 11th, the sporting community turned out in large numbers opposing the bill and sharing information with the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee about the role of trapping and wildlife management. Washington State relies on the services provided by licensed trappers to aid in human wildlife conflict mitigation through the Wildlife Control Operator Program. These specialized trappers help mitigate conflict and improve coexistence on the landscape. Additionally, fly fishing community pointed out how the bill would ban the sale of fur swatches to individuals who enjoy the hobby of fly tying. Despite that testimony, HB 1775 passed out of committee on February 19th by a narrow vote of 6 in favor to 5 opposed. CSF has been actively engaged on this issue, drawing from our successful efforts in 2024 when we opposed Senate Bill 6294, a similar fur ban proposal that was successfully killed. That victory underscored the importance of collaboration with the Washington Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus and coalition partners to protect trapping and the utilization of fur products for activities like fly fishing. This year, CSF is once again mobilizing to ensure that HB 1775 does not inadvertently disrupt wildlife management practice. Our team is closely monitoring the bill's progress and preparing to provide testimony if it advances to further hearings, emphasizing the value of regulated trapping and practical use of fur in the out from the outdoor rec. Yeah, I mean, you guys are no strangers to this line of thought. What we've covered, what I've passionately got on a soapbox about. Um, all my years of trapping and advocating for non-commercialized trapping. Um, the benefits and everything that it provides. Last year was the first year it was brought to my attention. I guess I just kind of overlooked it always because I can remember going back to being a kid and uh, using spinning baits like Meps and Rooster Tails and I think there's some other ones, but anyway, we got rabbit fur. I mean, I think Meps at one point would pay you for squirrel tails, so like that stuff has always been used. And when you start talking about these fur bans and coming after the air finger quote recreational trapper, the ripple effect of that is far reaching. And it's nice to know that we have partners in the angling community that have a concern about this and that was brought to the attention with so many of these attacks on fur in the last handful of years, especially last year, as Marie rightfully points out. There in Washington, again, I referenced Rhode Island, Massachusetts had similar bills. Some bills here in the Northeast also attempts. They died in committee, but same kind of deal. I think there was even one a couple years ago in South Carolina that attacked some fur farming. So, as often as the case with some of these things, some people start off with they think it's well intended idea and have no idea the depth that it goes to or the incidental casualties that would be created by passage. Now it's unfortunate this bill has legs and is moving. I have no doubt Marie will bring us updates as needed and any calls to action. You'll hear it here. But yeah, heads on a swivel, Washington. You guys are just constantly under the gun, especially trappers. Maybe not intentionally in this case, maybe so. Who knows what the true motivations are? But uh, you're in the spotlight again, so act accordingly. And it's good to hear that there was a good population of folks that showed up to that hearing. That's a nice change to hear for once. People getting activated early instead of being reactionary here as you're on the precipice of getting a thing passed and getting to it early, as we often talk about here and suggest early in the legislative process is preferred. Kill this stuff where it stands in that early committee as soon as you can by being tuned in and an ear to the ground, listening what's going on, paying attention, um, and not having that bigger fight in the end of a session because that spells trouble. So keep up the good work in Washington and stay alert here. All right, let's go to Minnesota. This from Bob Matthews. House File 276, championed by members of the Minnesota Legislative Sportsman's Caucus, would discount resident fishing licenses for anglers age 65 and over from $25 to $15. To avoid a shortfall in the Minnesota Game and Fish Fund, the bill directs money from the general fund back to Minnesota DNR to offset funding foregone through these discounts. CSF submitted formal testimony to support the bill, which was heard in committee last week. Typically, such a discount would reduce the revenue realized by the Minnesota DNR and diminish its ability to conserve the North Star State's storied fishery populations. This legislation, however, would calculate the total revenue that would have been generated if the licenses purchased by seniors had been sold at the standard rate of $25 and then reimburses the DNR the difference from the general fund. This reimbursement mechanism ensures that the Game and Fish Fund is not diminished year over year and that the DNR may continue to carry out the important work of providing Minnesota anglers with quality opportunities to target their favorite species. Although House File 276 was laid over for further discussion, it was positively received during its hearing, ensuring that that the legislators that wish to provide discounted or free hunting and fishing licenses to deserving demographics such as seniors or veterans do so by reimbursing the state Fish and Wildlife Agency as one of CSF's top priorities. And CSF will continue to advocate for legislation that provides increased opportunities without sacrificing agency funding. That's what we're talking about when we talk about this issue, and it feels like it's weekly now. But there's a great example from Bob and Minnesota, win-win. And obviously it didn't go any further, but in this scenario, this is what we're trying to achieve. And what I often talk about, like, when we as an organization, our standing policy, the first thing people hear is, "Oh, CSF's against it." Now, wait a second, hold your breath. Let me go two more words deep in that sentence as to why. And as you guys, the audience, here, like I just acknowledge, like week in and week out here, um, is that lack of funding. And here you got an example of, yeah, let's go ahead and take care of our seniors, give them a $10 discount, and let's implement a solve to calculate the missed funds, refund that back to that fund from the general fund. Say fund one more time, Fred. Holy smokes. And and make it right. And then everyone wins. And then we're good. DNR is not missing out on their critical dollars that they need. That's how they operate and mission delivery. And our seniors, God love them. My old man got in my ear about this not too long ago, wanting his senior license because they upped the age in the state of New Hampshire. He says, I want my senior license. So I know people get to a certain age and they're like, hey, man, I'm looking for that discount. And I don't blame them, fixed incomes and all, just as long as we have that fix. So there, good stuff there. And like to see more of that collaborative effort and everyone winning there. Um, maybe that example carries forward another time in Minnesota. Update from South Carolina. This from Connor Barker. On January 30th, South Carolina Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chair and National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucus's Executive Council member, Representative Bobby Cox, and caucus co-chair Representative Heather Bauer introduced House Bill 3872, which would limit the loss of available acreage open to hunting for South Carolina sportsmen and women. On February 18th, House Bill 3872 was reported favorably out of the House Wildlife Subcommittee on a 5-0 vote as amended. Prior to the subcommittee hearing, CSF submitted comments in support of 3872. That same bill is now awaiting consideration by the full House Wildlife, Natural Resources, and Environmental Affairs Committee. As amended, 3872 applies to South Carolina's managed lands, which are defined as lands owned by the state in which the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources holds management authority and are enrolled in the Wildlife Management Area Program. The following provisions also apply under 3872. DNR managed lands must be open to hunting access unless limited by the DNR for fish and wildlife management or otherwise limited by statute outside of the DNR's authority. DNR must exercise its authority in a manner that supports, promotes, and enhances hunting opportunities. Land management decisions must not result in the net loss of habitat land acreage available for hunting opportunities. If the loss of acreage for hunting were to occur, South Carolina DNR shall expeditiously find replacement acreage to compensate for the closure, and the South Carolina DNR must submit to the Senate Fish, Game, and Forestry and House Agricultural, Natural Resources, Environmental Affairs Committee a written report describing the acreage that was disclosed or that was closed to hunting during the previous fiscal year and the acreage that was open to compensate for the closure. CSF thanks Representatives Bauer and Cox for their leadership on this issue, as well as the House Wildlife Subcommittee for passing this important piece of legislation. We look forward to coordinating with the caucus and the South Carolina DNR and our partners to continue to advance critical measure. Good stuff. Thank you, Connor. Appreciate that. And yeah, look, I think what's important there, when we talk about access and available lands, that's one of the barriers and one of the things that makes it hard for people to continue in our hunting traditions. Um, you gotta take some away and make sure you're replacing it with something and make that access public. So good stuff there. All right, we're gonna wrap it up here. You guys have been awesome listening the last few weeks. Have been longer episodes, so I give you some time back here this week. Coming up here to Northeast in Vermont, um, Vermont House Bill 132 was introduced, seeks to prohibit the use of bait while engaging with fur bears, specifically as it relates to the use of firearms, archery tackle up and down, and crossbows. Though fur bears sums up a large amount of species in Vermont, it's safe to read between the lines here. What we're talking about is the use of bait for coyotes and bobcats. Um, you can't bait bear in Vermont, and obviously, waterfowl, turkeys, and deer are not considered fur bears in the state of Vermont. What I don't know, and I'm trying to think, I don't have the top of my head, but the fisher, foxes could be wrapped up in this. But I mean, in general, what they're talking about is coyotes, and the bobcat season that Vermont enjoys. So again, another example of legislating management practices away from the state authority, that is the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Board, who is entrusted to make these decisions, working with Vermont Fish and Wildlife talent, their biologists, their scientists, and going with the recommendations of those folks and utilizing all methods of take for in this case fur bear management. We submitted testimony, obviously opposing this for the reasons I just espoused. Um, update you as we can if this thing moves or not. But here again, um, some of the more lower hanging fruit. I feel like we're always talking about coyotes, fur bears trapping in the Northeast this time of year. Now it's that attack of attack on a border commission, trying to seize on their ability, their authority to set regulations, set rules. Uh, the authority's already in place. Gotta say it. Let the people that know what they're doing do it. Letting folks in state houses legislate wildlife management is a poor practice and typically leads to very bad results. Um, see plenty of examples from 2024. So as updates come here in Vermont, I will bring those to you and let you know. And hopefully we can knock this one back. I know it was met with good opposition from in-state partners and interested parties as well as the Vermont Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus and our leadership there. So um, hopefully maybe next week I'll give you a little update. We are hosting legislative summit, a legislative event there in Montpelier uh, this week. So it will definitely be a topic of discussion there with the interested parties and folks that show up to that caucus event. So hopefully it can bring you some more information on that specific bill next week. As far as this week goes, that's it. That's a wrap. That's the show. One more time, thanks again to Chris Horton for coming on, talking about that important piece of legislation there with the fix for the excise taxes, digital marketplaces. Thank you to our colleagues for their contributions and their articles, and thank you, the listener, the audience, for taking us along during your day as much as you do. and keeping this humble podcast in the upper parts of the podcast charts and ranks, however you want to call it. Um, Nearly a month now of max exposure, which has been great and been well received, and we're very happy and proud of that. And you guys, like I've been saying for the last 4 weeks, are making that happen and driving that train. So um, please keep up the great work, tuning in, listening, downloading, reviewing, sharing, filling in stars, all of that. We appreciate it. No feature this week, just the weekly roundup. Do go back, check out our wonderful conversation with a wonderful man, Will Primos, from last week. Talk about a fundraising effort, but more of that story is communicating the message of conservation, how it's funded, why our management practices, our science-based management practices are the envy of the world, why we get it right, and what Will's ultimate goal is with this fundraising opportunity with his guns. But really, the bigger story is telling our story. Here, Will put it in his words, and you can go back and listen to that. We will catch you all next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. We'll see you next week. Bye bye. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.